Okay. Let's do it. What do I think about heroes? Well, we've all seen them, haven't we? Swanning about the place with their disproportionately high cheekbones and comically massive weapons.
Wanker.
What the fuck?
A little over a month ago, Microsoft have revealed a new look at a game series that has been in development hell for as long as I can remember, and that game series happened to be Fable. Now, you would think that a series that have been locked away for such a long time will be welcomed with open arms by its fans, but instead it had caused a bit of controversy over social media with its depiction of the female protagonist shown in its debut trailer. Now, some of you may be living under a rock, or some of you may honestly just don't care, but for the past decade there has been a cultural shift within gaming, or I would say more specifically in the West, in how they depict women in video games, Hollywood, entertainment, and in general. Now, the issue that a portion of gamers, including myself, had with the female protagonist is that in the new trailer is that developers appear to have gone out their way to make her as unattractive as possible. Now, I know some of you are probably thinking in your head, oh my god, these incels are at it again, but stop for a moment and just hear me out. The reason why I'm saying that the developers are going out their way to depict female characters in such an unappealing way is when you discover the actual real life actress or face model that the characters are designed after, you realize that, man, their real life counterpart is so attractive and so beautiful. And then you look at the character model and say, what the hell is going on? Like, why is that? So in this video, I just want to explore the possible reasons why the West has shifted its depiction of women in gaming in Hollywood. But first, before we dive into the video, make sure you hit that subscribe button, that notification bell for more gaming content here on this channel. Now, I'm not sure how long this video is going to be. I'm just going whatever my mind leads me. Sure, maybe you can make an excuse and say it's just flat out incompetence, or maybe that the technology isn't there. But then you have to ask yourself, what about Japanese studios or Eastern developer studios and how they depict their women in video games? Because perfect example, Hideo Kojima in his studio, they mostly use motion capture technology to take real life people and put them into their fantasy worlds. And you look at the character named Quiet in the Metal Gear series, she looks exactly like her real life counterpart. You also look at the female characters in Death Stranding, they look just as feminine and attractive that you would see in their real life counterpart. Look at Devil May Cry, and also the male characters look just as handsome and as attractive as their real life counterparts. So why is it when it comes to Western studios, they have this weird asphyxiation of just taking female characters and making them as hideous as possible, while when it comes to their male counterpart, they're either untouched, or when it comes to objectification, it's been cranked up a notch. And we're supposed to be completely fine with that? But I will say this. Before the year 2014, articles from places like Vox, Vice, Polygon, or Kotaku that focus on issues such as sexism in video games, the lack of female representation in video games, and dumbass articles such as male video game characters speak twice as much as female characters in games was nearly non-existent. And why the year 2014 to be exact? What event took place in 2014 that turned the game industry and even Hollywood on its head?
Gamergate, what has become known as Gamergate.
The controversy some are calling Gamergate.
A hashtag war between some gamers and critics that has been raging for months and is now spilled over into the real world.
Well, you guessed it. That's right, it was Gamergate. Now, some of you may be too young or even heard of the name Gamergate, but don't know exactly what it is. But I won't spend too much time on it because this can be an entirely different video series of itself. This event had changed the cultural landscape throughout the entire world. But to sum things up as quickly as I can, this entire saga had put gaming journalism and game corporations at odds with the gaming community. The friction between these entities were brewing even before Gamergate began to take shape. See, before Gamergate, there was one particular incident that made the gaming community begin to question the integrity of gaming journalism and game studios. This controversy centered around a highly anticipated game of that time called Kane and Lynch around 2007. Now, around this time, the game was heavily promoted on GameSpot.com. See, I was a huge fan of GameSpot. In fact, I always thought that it was much more superior and to IGN. That IGN just couldn't compete with GameSpot. Some of my favorite reviewers came from GameSpot, and one of those reviewers was Jeff Gerstmann himself. I love his review style. I love his complete honesty, and you could trust the guy. So what happened was he happened to be the reviewer of Kane and Lynch, and I will say this: he didn't have much good things to say about Kane and Lynch, and in fact he gave it a pretty low score, to the point that it pissed off the studios who created Kane and Lynch, and the studio ended up contacting GameSpot and said to GameSpot, hey, what's going on? We gave you all this money to promote and put all the advertisements all over your website, and your boy Jeff had gave us a bad review. What's going on? What you going to do about it? Now, as a game media or a game journalist site, they are the middleman. They are the in-between. You would figure that, hey, when it comes to gaming journalism, they speak for the gamers. They keep the developers in check. They're the ones that go out and give the report to gamers of whether or not that you should invest in this particular game. Is the game good? Is the game bad? People go to these game journalists because of their opinion. They trust them. We gave their trust to them. So you would figure that GameSpot would be for the gamer and say, hey, yeah, dude, you gave us the money and everything, but hey, if your game is bad, it's bad. But instead, GameSpot ended up firing Jeff Gerstmann for their review and then wiped the review off their website. So do you see where this issue is? And this had pretty much triggered everybody within the gaming community, because they say, hey, now we know that these companies can actually influence you guys, and you guys won't protect us, you guys won't defend us, and then you end up firing one of your own employees for doing their own job. Good journalism, saying and being honest and say, hey, this isn't a good game, and they didn't back their own employee. So this had pretty much rang a lot of alarm bells within the gaming industry, and it created that wedge, that divide between gaming journalism and the gaming community as a whole. In the case of Gamergate, this has spawned some influential figures within the YouTube gaming commentary space and social political figures who would have a powerful influence over gaming culture here in the West for years to come. With the whole Gamergate situation, both gaming journalists and game developer integrity begin to come into question by gamers even more after the Kane and Lynch situation. One important woman was in the midst of all of this. Her name is Zoe Quinn. She was developing a game called Depression Quest. It was heavily criticized for it not being a good game, but for some strange reason, the game was highly praised by journalists and was even given so many awards. Well, gamers later find out that one of the game journalists who gave her an award was also someone she was sleeping with. On top of that, she was sleeping with 4 other game developers while dating her boyfriend, who was also a game developer at the time. You see where the conflict of interest comes into play? So gamers came together, rallied together to call out this form of corruption within the industry. So what the gaming media did was to deflect the attention off of them and their bad ethics in gaming journalism. They instead band together in a way to gain the mainstream media's attention and spin a narrative that gamers are sexist and unwelcoming to women, despite the fact that Gamergate had plenty of women who were against questionable relationship between gaming journalism and game developers. But I digress. See, deflection is the perfect strategy for those who are empowered. Gamers are peasants, and the game journals are the upper echelon within the hierarchy of the game industry. See, they have access to information that the average gamer doesn't have, and the studio essentially relies on these game journals to give them good rapport, to spread the news to the peasants so the peasants can continue to consume their media. Now, what happens if both journals and the game studios are in bed together? How can we trust them? This is where the conflict of interest becomes to take center fold. And what happens when both entities come together to plot against the very people who support them and gave them relevance in today's industry? So what both the game journals and the game journalists and the game industry has done, or the studios have done, has collaborated together and created a campaign to attack the gaming community, and it pretty much spread it all throughout modern media today. And the media came together and it became an all-out attack on gamers. Why is this important? Well, it set up the framework for the key terminologies used today on social media, such as the modern audience, incels, man babies, and the list goes on and on. Now that gamers, despite females being gamers as well, are now set up as misogynist, sexist pigs. This had created opportunities for social political influencers such as Anita Sarkeesian to come in and turn the whole Western game industry on its head. People like her and many gaming journalists who shares the same beliefs begin to take over the narrative and how women should be depicted in video games. They flood the media with their narrative. The narrative that Anita would say,
everything is sexist, everything is racist, everything is homophobic, and you have to point it all out.
Everything is racist and everything is sexist and you need to call it out. Now, this had put Western developers, in my opinion, in a tight spot because cancel culture had begun to rear its ugly head. Developers desperately trying to not appear sexist, which allow Anita and many others like her to infiltrate the industry, kind of like how Palpatine infiltrated the Republic in the prequel Star Wars trilogy. Then, of course, you have Naughty Dog's Neil Druckmann beginning to simp for Anita as he adopts her philosophies and begins to implement them into his games as well. The term, the male gaze, had become even more prevalent now that her Feminist Frequency series began taking off. She became the most influential person for the next 3 to 5 years, and so has the depiction of women begin to change in most Western developed games. Mass Effect Andromeda was one of the earlier victims of this shift in design philosophy as fans began to voice their opinions on the female protagonist in this new entry into the series. A media outlet called The Sun even made an article talking about this matter. And even NetherRealm Studios began to change their whole philosophy behind how they depict female characters in their game, especially with the upcoming release of Mortal Kombat 11 of that time. The character lead designer Brendan George states, "Our design is just getting much more mature and respectful. You're not going to be wearing a bikini to a fight. You're not going to be showing too much skin. I think it's just what the game is about. You're fighting for your life, and you're not going to be wearing such scantily clad items." Don't you see the hypocrisy in his statement? So let me get this straight. He said you're not going to show much skin in the fight. So if that's the case, then why does Garrus, Kano, Liu Kang, Jax, Johnny Cage, and many of the other male characters in Mortal Kombat 11 have their pecs on full display? But even if you ignore that, his logic still doesn't hold any weight. Trying to apply what he thinks is real life logic to a video game to where you can actually rip people's limbs and perform some of the most heinous fatalities ever known in a video game, it just doesn't quite add up. Because in a real fight with real fighters, less clothing is much preferable because there is less for your opponent to grab, which is why both men and women in the UFC and many other contact sports have more skin exposed for better maneuverability. So again, why are the men able to have the skin showing, but the women had to be fully covered? Think about that for a second. Now, we cannot forget the controversy surrounding Activision Blizzard's cash grab release of Diablo 2 Resurrected, where they have clearly went out of their way to censor the designs for the female characters and classes, where their bust is nearly non-existent, and some of them are hard to distinguish whether or not they are a man or a woman. The original producer of Diablo 2, named Mark Kern, was even disappointed in these changes. Which brings us to what is currently happening right now. Most character designs today utilizes motion capture technology, where they can take real life people, real life models, and they can capture facial expressions, movements, gestures, you name it, and implement them into their game characters, into their game world as well. And when it comes to this motion capture technology, Sony, I would say that is pretty much headed to the curve with this, especially with the Horizon series and its sequel, because the characters that you see in Horizon Zero Dawn reflect the actors and actresses that you see in real life, or supposed to. And what I mean by it is that one of the most iconic, I guess you say, modern video game character of today, especially a female protagonist, is Aloy herself. The game has been highly praised for its story, its storytelling, and its gameplay, and Aloy is at the very front of it because people highlight her as a pretty good female protagonist. But she also has a lot of controversy tagged along with her. It's because of her character model, how she's less feminine and more masculine in her stature and how she expressed herself, even down to her face. And the point is, what I'm trying to say is, what makes all this criminal is the fact is that the actual actress who Aloy is designed after is really, really, really beautiful, and yet Aloy doesn't reflect that in any way. What is most disturbing is the fact is that the director felt that the feminine look of a professional model didn't portray quote-unquote strength. So don't you see the irony in all this? By trying not to appear sexist, you end up becoming sexist by stating that the model looks like she would cry if she break it down, simply because of how feminine she looks. So a feminine looking woman can't portray strength in her own way, and the only way to do that is by making her appear more masculine. Like, come on, let's make this make sense. This logic is flawed. So you mean to tell me the only way for women to appear much stronger is to have them to appear much more masculine? Japanese developers destroyed this entire narrative front and back. What are you talking about? See, some people may not see this as a big deal, while others will point it out and they're instantly labeled as incels. They're just insecure. What's the matter? You're mad because they remove porn from your favorite games. But these tactics, these shaming tactics, isn't just exclusive to just men, because women who are content creators and YouTubers and gamers as well are also receiving the same ridicule, for the simple fact is they don't even like the representation and the depiction of women that Western developers and Hollywood has been putting out there as of recently as well. You have content creators such as Vera Dark. She's been battling against gaming journals since I can remember. And also you have one of the biggest Tomb Raider fans, one of the biggest fans of Lara Croft. You have a YouTuber named Melody Mac. She's been battling against the mainstream media and the game journals and the weirdos on Twitter as well for the depiction and the desexualization or the power fantasy, which is Lara Croft and the Tomb Raider franchise. And then of course, you can't forget that Star Wars Girls. She's a female content creator within the nerd culture side of things when it comes to the Star Wars community and Star Trek and many other things within this community. She's been very vocal about the handling and the mishandling of Rey Palpatine or Rey Skywalker, and to turning them into Mary Sues and everything of the sort. You also have Casey Cage. She's also been vocal on her YouTube channel and also on Twitter about the depiction of women here in the West and also in video games in Hollywood. So, and they have been receiving a ton of backlash. All three of these women and many more women out there, that is so many of them out there, I can't name them all, but these are the few that, or the three that comes to my mind as I'm making this video. But they have received a lot of backlash, and these very same people are telling them that they have inner misogyny within them for having this form of ideology or speaking out against the depiction of women here in the West. It just make this make sense. You have women who disagree with this, but they're saying that no, you're inner misogyny. You've been conditioned to think this way. Like this sounds like a cult to me, you know? The list can go on and on. This is not just about males being insecure, about their masculinity and the fact is that women are now being empowered and represented in video games. Because guess what? Women has always been represented in video games, and most of my favorite video game characters are females. In fact, they've been empowered since the inception of Samus Aran. Samus is one of my favorite female characters in video games of all time. Been a fan ever since, and most of her fan base are males. It's just ridiculous that they have this revisionist history that women were never empowered or represented in video games at all. It just doesn't make sense. Well, I digress. Well, anyway, all I want to tell you is that don't ever allow people on social media or in real life try to tell you or make you feel like you're this morally corrupt person for standing up for what you believe in. Because it's more than just, hey, we want attractive, sexy, beautiful women in video games. It's much deeper than that. Because what's going on is this is full-on censorship, guys, under the fact of diversity, inclusion, and representation. That's just all this is. And they want to control what is and what is not acceptable. And that's where the problem is. We love to be absorbed and placed in these fantasy worlds. We love to be something that we're not when it comes to video games, which is why we have these virtual worlds. We have MMORPGs that allow us to create our own avatars. And 9 times out of 10, you never create the character to look exactly like you. You end up creating a character that looks completely different than you. Most of the time, more attractive than you. Much skinnier than you. It's because we want to escape reality. We want to put ourselves into something that isn't truly us. That's the point of video games. We are attractive to attractive things. We love beautiful looking people, beautiful looking things. This is how we survived as a human species. This is what brings both men and women together to procreate, to populate the planet. Because when we first lay eyes on one another, the first thing that attracts us are the physical features before anything else. This is in us. We've been hardwired this way, but they're trying to change and warp your perception to believe otherwise. People like Alina Sarkeesian and places like Kotaku and Polygon, they all want to control how we perceive the world through entertainment. Look at the current depiction of men and women here when it comes to the West, when it comes to animation, when it comes to video games. They made them indistinguishable. Now men and women in entertainment, especially in video games, it's hard to distinguish what's a man and what's a woman. Women today in most of these games and also in animations in the West, women are less curvy. They have no bust. Even when they walk, they don't sway their hips left and right. They don't switch their hips. Now they walk and stroll just like a man. There's no difference between them. They are literally a man in a wig at this point. So they want to put in our minds that there's no difference between a man and a woman, which is a complete lie. We're completely different from one another, and there's nothing wrong with that. Women perceive life much different than how a man perceived life. Growing up playing video games, most of my favorite characters were female characters. It wasn't just how they were designed physically, but it was also how they maneuvered through the world and its environments much differently than a man. But now women in video games are now adopting masculine traits and mannerisms. She shouldn't just be a female version of an already existing male characters. I look at the current Star Wars that they're trying to push out right now. The female protagonist is literally a female Han Solo. There's nothing that's feminine about the character. Her mannerisms, the way she walks, the way she strolls, the way she acts. She's literally just a female Han Solo. There's nothing that really stands her out from Han Solo or a male protagonist. You can literally not make her a female and just put a male there and you wouldn't know the difference. There's no difference at all. No difference at all. And this is where we at right now. And to me, I call that lazy design and lazy writing. Now, the people who are now in control, which is these woke people right now that's within our industry, the people that's in control of the narrative right now, all they're doing is projecting their own insecurities onto us. See, the media had convinced everybody that we're the insecure ones, when in fact they are. Perfect example, Anita Sarkeesian and her crew. For them to be a proponent and fighting against, gender stereotypes and fighting against the fact that society has placed these high beauty standards onto women, but then you turn around, you look at their anime avatar. What did they do when it came to their anime avatar? They made their anime avatar misrepresent what they actually look like and who they actually are in real life. They made their anime avatar look much beautiful than what they really are. Look at it. The meme pretty much writes itself. What about the male feminists who are running the game industry right now? The male feminists who are telling men that they're incels, that they're insecure over their masculinity. And you turn around, you look at Activision Blizzard. They had a whole frat boy life on that campus, sexual harassing women, paying women less than their male counterparts. But they're telling you that you're the sexist one. You get what I'm saying? You get where I'm going with this? And what about what's going on, as I said before? Making men and women so indistinguishable that there's no difference between the two. Why is that the case? If you notice within the game industry, we're starting to have a lot of trans women that are developing our games. And we already know the narrative that's going on. The narrative is, hey, trans women are real women. Their insecurities is to try to get the world and get people to accept that they are real women. So what do they do when it comes to designing video games? You strip away a woman's femininity. You get rid of her curves. You make her look busted up. You reduce her to the point to where she looks masculine as a male, to where now you can't determine what's a man or what's a woman at this point. It's because you look at the people who are in charge. You look at the people who set these narratives, and then you ask yourselves, what's going on here? Why is this the case? Why is this happening? And you see that it's their own insecurities that they're projecting upon us, but trying to convince us that we're the ones with the problems. You can't make this up. But there's one last thing I wanted to talk about, and I think this is really, really important for me to discuss this, because this narrative has really shaped society in general and is affecting our children. And me being a father, for those of you who don't know, I am a father. And guess what? I'm raising a daughter. I have a daughter. She's 14 years old. She's a teenager. She's developing. She's growing up. She's becoming a young woman. And I'm watching it through my eyes, my very own eyes. I watched her as a baby, and now she's growing up and she's navigating through life. And this type of narrative has affected this generation. They want our kids. They're after our kids. They're trying to change our kids' mind. And what I mean by that is, there was a video that was collaborated by Unreal and also Dove. They had this video to where they showed this woman in armor. She's fighting against this boss in this level. And then once the game is over, she goes into her dressing room. She takes off the armor, and she's this fat, heavyset, obese woman. And by the time she leaves to start a new game, she decides not to wear the armor and decide to go as herself. Now, after the trailer was done, my daughter came into the room. She wanted to see what I was up to and what I was doing. I asked her, hey, check out this video. After she finished watching the video, I asked her, if you was to go to the store and pick out, and you was to judge a game or pick a game based on the cover, which cover would you pick? The woman that looks thin and petite in that battle armor, or this obese woman right here? What would you pick? So she sat there for a second, and then she looked. She said, "I'll pick that one, the one in the armor." And she said, "Man, I would wear that armor myself. I think it's pretty cool," or whatever like that. But anyway, after she said it though, I see her face, and her face kind of frowned, or she had this face of guilt. And I asked her, like, "What's wrong?" And she said she felt bad at the fact is that, yes, she likes the woman in the armor, but she felt bad for not picking the heavyset obese woman. She felt bad for thinking that she's unattractive and obese. And I said to her, there's nothing to feel ashamed about. You're attractive to something that's attractive. That's not attractive. That's not appealing. And you shouldn't feel bad about it. And as I watch my daughter grow up, and I watch her social circle, and I watch today's generation, a lot of today's generation, by looking through my daughter's eyes, a lot of these children are walking on eggshells. A lot of these children are walking around with ideologies that they truly don't believe in, but because it's the politically correct thing to say, they just parrot those ideologies, but behind closed doors, they say how they really feel. And then they can't really express themselves around their friends because they don't know where their friends are at when it comes to these ideologies. They are afraid to being canceled. My daughter's afraid of being canceled for having her beliefs and what she likes and what she doesn't like. And my daughter literally said to me, like, maybe Dad, because she was reading my script, and she said, maybe you shouldn't say this. Maybe you should word it differently or whatever like that, because I don't want my daddy getting canceled and stuff like that. This is what our youth is going through. They are afraid to actually express themselves because they are afraid of being canceled, being doxxed, being bullied because they don't fit into the echo chamber of the narratives that's being pushed today in media, social media, and just in schools in general. And I find this quite scary, and this is something that needs to stop. It needs to stop. And I would say this: how can we fix this? Can it be fixed? Can something be done about it? And I truly believe yes. It eventually will fix itself, and we're seeing it right now. See, the thing is, what's going on right now, there's a cultural shift. We're starting to see a lot of things within gaming. We see the destruction, the collapse of Disney when it comes to the MCU, Star Wars. We're starting to see a lot of gamers, like when you look at the Hogwarts game, everybody went out there and supported when the media told you not to. We're starting to see a lot of this stuff. We're starting to see a lot of content creators, a lot of people developing and going indie and creating their own content to give people what they want. And that's what's going on right now. And I believe that the culture is going to swing back. The pendulum is going to swing back the other way. Because people, the silent majority is finally speaking. Twitter isn't real life. And Bud Light and many other companies are starting to realize that. Even when it comes down to the depiction of women. Street Fighter 6, totally dominating. And it really has Kotaku and a lot of these game journalists seething at the mouth, foaming at the mouth, upset that Cammy and Juri Han and Chun-Li are sexy and attractive. That sexy and attractive women are just dominating. That game developers are being treated and by gamers giving them their money and saying, hey, this is what we want. Companies are realizing that, hey, just give the fans what they want and we will get their money. Especially Japanese developers, this is not an issue for them. This is not an issue for them at all. But we're taking back the culture. We're trying to take games and bring games back to form and what it used to be. And within the next couple of years, I think we'll start to see a shift for the betterment of everybody. Everybody wins when we get what we want. So that pretty much wraps this video. I definitely want to hear your thoughts. What do you think about the depiction of women in video games? Do you think it's completely fine? Do you think I'm just being just a straight up incel or whatever you want to call me? Or do you think there really is a problem with this, that the Western developers are really going out their way to destroy femininity, the feminine form altogether? I definitely want to hear your thoughts in the comment sections below. So this pretty much wraps this video up. I will have another video similar to this where we'll be talking about Hollywood, comic books, and you know what they've been doing with the Disney movie, with the Disney MCU, and everything of that sort as well, and the comparison of what Japan been doing with animations and manga versus, you know, American animation and comic books. I'll be doing a whole thing on that too. So if you like content like this, let me know. I will make more content like this in the near future. This is MugenLord, sign off. I'll see you Game Fiends later. Peace out.